The sharp clang of a fork hitting the tile floor split through the suffocating air. Anna Brooks flinched, her bandaged right hand trembling in a moment of helplessness. The crowded dining room froze. Every eye turned toward her, some with frowns, some with whispers of pity, and others with smirks of ridicule. Anna bent down, fumbling to pick up the fork with her clumsy left hand, then quickly stood up, pasting on her usual polite smile. But her eyes betrayed her, glassy, fragile, as if she wished she could vanish from the room. Pain shot up her wrist like an invisible blade twisting deeper with each pulse. The once white bandage had turned pale gray, clinging tight to a wound that still refused to heal. Yet Anna kept pushing through, carrying trays, pouring coffee, wiping tables, all with her left hand. She needed this job. She needed rent money, money for utilities, money to fill the empty fridge at home. Giving up was not in the survival manual she lived by. Across the room, Damon Price, the restaurant manager, leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee as if enjoying a show. Every time Anna faltered or winced from the pain, his lips curled upward, his eyes sharp, watching like a predator waiting for prey to stumble. Then his voice rang out, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Careful, Anna. We wouldn't want the customers to pay extra for broken plates." The words weren't shouted, but they cut through the air like a knife. An awkward silence followed. A few customers frowned. Some slowed in their eating, but no one spoke up. Everyone knew silence was always safer. Anna swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," she murmured, her voice lost in the clinking of cups. She turned away, but her stiff shoulders gave her away. Damon took another slow sip of coffee, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. For him, power didn't come from his title as manager, but from moments like this, seeing someone tremble, humiliated, diminished in front of a crowd. Customers began whispering. A woman in a business suit shook her head. "He always targets her." Her two colleagues nodded, their eyes flicking toward Anna with a trace of pity. But pity wasn't what Anna wanted. All she longed for was one quiet shift, free from the invisible blades thrown by the man hiding behind the title of manager. Pain, exhaustion, humiliation, all of it pooled in Anna's eyes. Yet her lips clung to that fragile smile. She knew that if she showed even the smallest crack, Damon would use it to crush her further. And then, from a quiet corner of the cafe, an elderly man lifted a cup of black coffee, his silver-gray eyes observing without missing a thing. To everyone else, he was nothing more than a frail old regular in a worn coat. No one guessed the truth hidden beneath his calm exterior. His name was Lionel Ward, and he wasn't here just for coffee. He was the true owner of the restaurant. Lionel sat silently, his calloused fingers tapping lightly against the porcelain cup. His gaze followed Anna's strained steps, the customers' uneasy glances, and the cruel smirk playing at Damon's mouth. He heard it all. He saw it all. He felt it all. Inside him, a quiet fury stirred, not the kind that bursts outward, but the kind that coils tighter and tighter, like an ocean swell preparing to crash. He had entrusted his managers with authority. He had believed the philosophy of respect for people that he built would endure. But the scene before him struck that belief like a slap across the face. Anna, a young woman, forced to work with a broken hand, and Damon, the man paid to lead and protect his staff, using his position instead to humiliate and grind them down. Lionel inhaled deeply. Behind the facade of an aging customer, his eyes turned cold with a decision taking shape, a decision that would change everything. Because Damon had no idea. The man he dismissed as nothing more than the old guy with coffee in the corner was, In truth, the owner of it all, the one who could decide his fate with a single word. And in that moment, the balance of power had already begun to shift, though Damon remained blissfully unaware. The coffee pot tipped too far. Just one dark streak spilled across the counter, but the sound it made was like a verdict. Anna Brooks froze, her left hand trembling as she tried to steady the tray. The crowded dining room fell silent in an instant. Damon Price approached. His polished shoes struck the floor with heavy beats, each one echoing like a declaration of power. He stopped right in front of Anna, his breath carrying the stale scent of coffee and the arrogance woven into every strand of his slicked-back hair. "Again?" His voice was low, but sharp enough for nearby customers to hear. "How many times now, Anna? A staff member who becomes a burden. What good is that?" The room froze solid. A customer dropped a silver spoon, the metallic clink against porcelain cutting through the air. A woman in a business suit clenched the handle of her purse, eyes flashing with silent fury. But no one spoke up. Anna lowered her head. She quickly wiped the coffee with a damp cloth, her bandaged hand curling back in pain. A forced smile returned to her lips, but they trembled uncontrollably. In her chest, her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might rip through her ribs. Damon leaned in slightly, his finger pressed deliberately against the bandage on her injured wrist. Anna flinched, her eyes wide from the sudden stab of pain. He smirked, leaning close to her ear. "Don't forget, Anna, whether this job exists or vanishes, that's up to me." The words were a cold knife twisting into memories she had tried to bury. A nightmarish flashback surged back. The dim office light, Damon's voice over the phone snarling about cash already withdrawn, the look he gave when he caught her standing at the doorway, and the cruel twist of her wrist that made bone crack. Anna shut her eyes tight, swallowing hard. No one knew the truth. To everyone else, she was just the clumsy waitress who made too many mistakes. To them, he was simply a strict manager, perhaps a bit harsh. The truth was far more brutal. In the corner of the cafe, Lionel Ward sat motionless. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, but his gaze burned. He saw every gesture, heard every word. Each detail lodged itself like an arrow in his memory. He had trusted his managers to lead. He had believed his philosophy of respect for people still flowed through the veins of the business. But the scene before him was a betrayal carved in daylight. Anna, a young woman, forced to work with a broken hand. Damon, the man paid to protect his team, using his power to humiliate and prey upon them. Whispers rose among the customers. "He always targets that girl. Disgraceful. Shameful." Damon heard it all, yet remained unbothered. He smiled in victory, sipping coffee again. To him, this was just another performance of power, another moment to cement his dominance by crushing someone weaker. But what he didn't know was that a pair of eyes had already pierced through his mask. A hand with true authority already held his fate. Lionel shifted slightly, the sunlight catching his silver hair, giving him a presence that was quietly commanding. He wasn't just the frail old man in the corner. He was the true owner of this place. And he was watching his manager, the one paid to safeguard his staff, turn into a predator. Lionel's fury did not erupt in noise. It flowed beneath the surface, deep and relentless, like lava moving under a thin crust of earth. And when it finally erupted, nothing would contain it. Anna left the counter, clutching the tray to her chest, swallowing her tears before they could break free. Damon turned away, satisfied, believing the battle had ended in his favor. But in the corner, Lionel tapped his finger against the porcelain cup. A small signal. A decision already made. The game of power had just begun. And Damon Price was about to face a truth he could never have imagined. The bandage wrapped around her right hand felt like a curse. Every time Damon deliberately brushed against it, Anna Brooks felt the pain surge back, dragging her straight into the night she had tried so hard to bury in memory. That night, the restaurant had closed. The dim yellow lights cast long shadows. The rows of chairs stood silent like mute witnesses. Anna lingered, gathering napkins, straightening chairs, her heart lighter at the thought of overtime pay. Then a strange sound drifted from the office at the end of the hall. Damon's voice, low and urgent, edged with strain. "The cash has been moved. The books are clean. No one will ever find it." Anna froze, clutching a napkin. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but every word cut into her ears like a blade. She had noticed the cash discrepancies before, had asked herself questions, but never imagined embezzlement. Now the truth slammed into her like a hammer. The door swung open. Damon stepped out. His eyes met hers, pausing half a beat, then narrowing like a knife. "How much did you hear?" His voice was tight, low, but heavy. Anna stammered, I was just cleaning the tables. I didn't." He closed the distance in 2 strides. The scent of whiskey clung to his breath. His stare cut straight into her fear. "You think you're clever, do you?" Before she could react, Damon twisted her right wrist violently. The sharp crack of bone echoed through the empty room. Pain like lightning shot through her body, driving her to her knees, her vision blurred with tears. She tried to scream, but what escaped was only a strangled sob. "Silence!" Damon hissed, his voice chillingly even. "One word, and next time it won't just be your hand." Then he let go, straightening, adjusting his tie as if he had just ended an ordinary meeting. Anna curled on the floor beside a chair, clutching her mangled wrist, her heart pounding wildly. He vanished into the dark, leaving behind a piece of her spirit shattered beyond repair. That night, Anna did not go to the hospital. She was afraid. Afraid of questions, afraid of retaliation, afraid of losing her job. She bought bandages from a small pharmacy, trembling as she wrapped them around her wrist, each loop tightening the weight of humiliation. And the next morning, as if nothing had happened, she put on her apron, forced on a smile, and carried trays with her remaining hand. Now, standing in the crowded restaurant, that memory returned with suffocating clarity. Anna forced herself to breathe steadily, but her hand trembled as the cloth touched the spilled coffee. Her heart pounded in her chest, reminding her that the horrific secret had never truly disappeared. From his corner seat, Lionel Ward saw everything. He noticed not just clumsy movements, but the flicker of terror across Anna's face. He had been to war, had seen the eyes of soldiers carrying wounds they could never voice, and now he recognized that same look right before him. Anna forced a smile and carried on. Damon leaned back, smug, certain the past had locked her into silence. But he had no idea a witness had already seen through the mask, and that witness was someone he could never imagine. Lionel set his coffee cup down, the porcelain striking the table with a sharp note. He had seen enough. And in his steel-gray eyes, a decision blazed to life. The truth had to be revealed. At noon, Harbor Street Bakery buzzed with the sound of spoons against plates. Customers' laughter blending with the warm scent of buttered pastries and freshly roasted coffee. In the midst of the rush, one man did not join the flow of noise, Lionel Ward. The elderly man with silver hair and a worn brown coat sat quietly in the corner, looking like nothing more than a harmless old customer. But his eyes, steady and cold, followed every movement with unwavering focus. He watched Anna closely, the way she carefully hid her bandaged hand behind a tray, the way her shoulders trembled and then straightened again, the way her smile lingered but never reached her eyes. Every small detail Lionel absorbed. He had seen that same look before, long ago on the battlefield, the look of someone carrying more pain than their body could endure, yet still forcing themselves to march forward. Ross Damon Price was a different sight entirely. He sat elevated, as if the restaurant were his private stage, the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes when Anna faltered, the curl of his lips when customers gave her pitying glances. Every gesture revealed the same pattern, savoring power by trampling on another. Lionel tilted his head, listening. At a table by the window, two middle-aged men whispered to each other. "Did you notice? He only yells at that girl, never anyone else." "Yeah. Last week a waiter spilled an entire pitcher of water and nothing happened. But if she so much as drops a spoon, he makes a scene." The old man sipped his now cold coffee. Inside him, the blade of anger drove deeper. This was not firm discipline. This was targeted abuse. At a table near the counter, 3 office workers in crisp suits leaned together, their voices low but just loud enough for Anna to hear as she passed. "Again, it's always her. He's been on her case for months. Shameful." Anna heard every word, but only pressed her lips tight and quickened her pace, as though trying to outrun their pitying eyes. Humiliation burned red across her neck, but the forced smile stayed plastered to her face. Lionel set his cup down. He had gathered enough pieces of the puzzle. Anna's fearful eyes, the murmurs of discontent from customers, the cruel satisfaction radiating from Damon. Together, they painted a dark portrait no internal report would ever dare reveal. He was not merely observing. He was quietly investigating. And behind the mask of a harmless old man, Lionel was already shaping a plan to expose the truth before it was too late. In that moment, Damon Price lifted his head, glancing around the room with smug ownership. But he had no idea that in this very room, the nobody old man he dismissed was in fact the one who truly held his fate. Power was shifting, quietly, irreversibly. The restaurant seemed lively on the surface, yet beneath the chatter and clinking of cutlery ran scattered murmurs, each one heavy with discontent. From his quiet corner, Lionel Ward sat still, his eyes sweeping across every table, his ears keenly filtering fragments of truth from the noise. At table 7 near the entrance, 2 old friends leaned in close. "See that? He always targets that girl." "Yeah. Last time the new waiter spilled a whole jug of milk, he just laughed it off. But with her, dropping a single spoon becomes a spectacle." Lionel gave a subtle nod, marking another piece of evidence. At a row of tables in the center, 3 office workers whispered, their voices barely rising above the sound of knives and forks. "He clearly enjoys cornering her, like it's some sort of game. Humiliating, especially in front of all these customers. She never complains, just bites her tongue and endures. Poor thing." Anna happened to pass by just then. Her back was straighter than usual, her lips curved into a fragile smile. But behind the worn uniform, her shoulders trembled slightly, as though she carried an invisible stone that only she could feel. Lionel sighed inwardly. He had seen this kind of silence too many times before. The silence of the powerless, suffocated until they no longer dared to speak. At the cashier's counter, 2 young men spoke openly, without restraint. She scrutinized for every little thing. Did you see the way he glared? Like he's just waiting for her to slip. It's not fair at all, but who would dare intervene? And that was the truth. No one dared. They whispered, they shook their heads, they pitied. Meanwhile, Anna was the one forced to swallow every humiliation, day after day. Lionel's hand tightened around his porcelain cup. He understood all too well the danger of these whispers. They were social proof that everyone knew, everyone saw, yet chose silence. And that very silence was what empowered Damon Price, giving him license to push further with each passing day. Lionel's gaze shifted slowly to Damon, the man lounging in his chair, legs crossed, lips curling upward as he watched Anna struggle to balance a tray with only one hand. His expression was not that of a diligent manager, but of a predator savoring the moment his prey floundered in despair. Lionel knew then this was no longer suspicion. This was a pattern, a deliberate sequence of actions repeated again and again, all aimed at destroying one person, Anna Brooks. The old man leaned slightly forward, bracing his hand against the table. His gray eyes glimmered with unwavering resolve. In his mind, a single vow took shape. This will not continue, not under a roof that bears my name. And Damon Price remained blissfully unaware that those whispers around him were already beating like drums, heralding the moment his mask would finally be torn away. That night, Harbor Street Bakery was already dark, with only the faint glow of the neon sign spilling through the glass window. The wind blew cold, scattering papers that rustled along the hallway. Lionel Ward stepped in through the staff entrance, using the old key he had kept since the first day the bakery opened. To the world, he was nothing more than a lonely old man who drank black coffee every morning. But now, in the shadows, he was no longer the quiet regular. He returned to his true self, a soldier hardened by the battlefield, the founder who had built this place from nothing but his own two hands. The hallway leading to the manager's office was silent, carrying only the burnt scent of old coffee. Lionel turned the lock, the dry click breaking the stillness. Inside, the cramped room was buried under chaotic stacks of paperwork, the ceiling's fluorescent light flickering with a weary rhythm, casting a pale glow on towers of files. He pulled open a drawer. Neatly arranged blue folders bore the same name repeated again and again, Anna Brooks. Lionel opened one, his brow furrowed. Page after page of alleged mistakes spilled out. Reports of spilled coffee, slow service, customer complaints. The language was biting, portraying Anna as clumsy and inept. But Lionel had seen her himself, working with her left hand, while her injured right arm stayed bound, yet still maintaining speed, precision, and a smile for every customer. These reports were nothing but a smokescreen. He turned to the next file. Not a single other employee's name appeared. Every so-called system error was pinned on Anna. Damon Price had written a script of his own, turning a resilient young woman into a scapegoat to shield himself. Lionel set the folder aside, his eyes sharpening with a cold glint. He reached for another pile, the cash log, receipts, and daily ledgers. The numbers did not add up. One day short by a few tens, the next by hundreds. Spikes and dips without reason. On paper, accounting showed adjustments due to system errors, but every confirmation signature bore Damon's hand. Lionel's heart pounded. Piece by piece, the picture was clear. Damon had been siphoning off cash, disguising it with doctored records, and forging a paper trail to pin the blame on Anna, using her as cover. Lionel leaned back in the chair, his eyes half closed as memories flooded in. The days when he was still in uniform, reminding his men, silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. Everyone sees it, but if no one speaks up, evil survives. That saying was no longer just a memory. It thundered now as an order in his heart. His eyes opened, steady and resolute, his aged hands pressed firmly on the wooden desk. He had the evidence. But to bring Damon down, paperwork alone would not be enough. He would need words from Damon's own mouth, a confession he could not escape. Outside the window, the streetlight swept across Lionel's face, carving deep lines of determination. He knew the real battle had begun, and the man who thought himself king within these walls was about to kneel before the truth. That night, Lionel Ward sat at his usual table by the window, pretending to sip from a cup of cold coffee. The cafe was nearly empty, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the fogged glass. The silence was so deep he could hear the clock on the wall ticking with each steady beat. The office door in the back was slightly ajar. From the narrow gap spilled a dim yellow light along with muffled voices pressed against the thin walls. Lionel tilted his head, straining his ears. Damon Price's voice came through, gravelly and triumphant. "What do you think?" "Everything's in place. That girl Anna? She's the perfect scapegoat. Any mistake in the books, I just pin it on her, and it's done." Another voice, softer, almost cautious. Surely, Evan Cole, the loyal accountant, replied, "But her hand, if someone asks. That's not easy to explain." Damon let out a short, cold laugh. "Her hand? I broke it. The night she tried to eavesdrop on a call in my office. I had to teach her a lesson. Now she's obedient, silent as stone. She thinks she's hiding something, but in truth, it's her own fear that keeps her under control." Lionel's heartbeat pounded. His fingers dug into the armrest of the chair, nails pressing so hard they left grooves in the wood. Every word spilling from Damon's mouth carved deeper into Lionel's rising fury. Damon's voice dropped lower, each syllable laced with venom. "She works with that bandaged arm. Customers pity her, but to me, it's the perfect excuse. One slip, I've got the records ready. When the time comes, I'll throw it all in her face and fire her in an instant. And the missing money? Who could ever prove it? On paper, every single fault belongs to Anna Brooks." Evan chuckled softly. "You're reckless, but I'll admit it. This system is airtight. Who would ever think a manager could be this cunning?" Lionel closed his eyes and drew in a long breath. In his mind, he saw Anna, her trembling hand awkwardly balancing trays, her forced smile like a mask hiding pain. And now he knew the truth. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't incompetent. She was a victim. His eyes opened, sharp as blades in the night. He already had the paperwork. Now he had the confession, spoken from Damon Price's own lips. There was no longer any doubt, no corner for Damon to hide. Lionel rose to his feet, his shadow stretching long across the floor, steady and unshaken. He knew the time for confrontation had not yet come, not tonight. But the battle was already decided. In that small office, Damon and Evan still laughed, believing themselves safe behind a shield of lies. They had no idea that just outside, an old man had become their judge, and the sentence had been written from this very moment. At the break of dawn, Harbor Street Bakery lit up once more, the smell of fresh bread mingling with the aroma of coffee drifting down the narrow street, drawing in the first customers of the day. Anna Brooks had arrived early, fastening her apron tightly around her waist, her left hand fumbling to compensate for her right hand still bound in bandages. She smiled, but in her eyes flickered the weariness of a stubborn shadow that never left her. At his familiar corner table, Lionel Ward sat in silence, a cup of black coffee neatly placed before him. But today, He wasn't there just to observe. On the worn wooden chair, his back was straight, his eyes gleaming with a resolve he had long hidden behind a gentle facade. The night before, after hearing Damon's confession with his own ears, Lionel had found no sleep. He had spread every paper across his desk, the falsified reports blaming Anna, the missing receipts, the suspicious adjustments. Each page was a nail in Damon's coffin. He stacked them into a folder, marked clearly, so no one could deny what was written. "Enough," he whispered to himself in the dark, his hands trembling not from age, but from anger long suppressed. The truth must be brought into the light. At dawn, he made a quiet phone call, his voice low yet unwavering. "I have proof of fraud and assault. Be ready, you'll need to be here this morning." There was silence on the other end. Then the reply came, "We'll be there." Now, as customers began to fill the bakery, Damon Price emerged from the office, his tie straightened, his face gleaming with the usual arrogance. He smiled politely at the guests. But the moment his eyes landed on Anna, his lips curled into a cruel smirk. Lionel watched closely, noting every detail, the disdainful frown, the smirk when Anna dropped a towel, the satisfaction written plainly across his face. Damon believed he was in control, that Anna would remain locked in fear. But what he did not know was that today would be the day his mask was torn away. Lionel drew in a deep breath. He thought back to the early years, from a small bakery with only a handful of staff to a chain known across the city. He had always sworn that the true recipe for success was not found in bread, but in the way people were treated. If he stayed silent today, that promise would turn to ashes. His fingers tapped against the table, 3 steady beats. The sound was small, yet in his heart, it was the drum roll of confrontation. Customers kept chatting, Anna kept serving, Damon kept strutting in his role as manager. But only Lionel knew the truth. The storm had gathered, and the moment of reckoning was near. In the pocket of his brown coat, the folder weighed heavy as stone, each page a blade ready to cut through Damon Price's lies. And when the police walked through that door, just as Lionel had arranged, Damon would have no escape. Lionel lifted his cup, taking a small sip. The bitterness spread across his tongue, yet in his chest bloomed a strange sweetness, the sweetness of justice about to be served. And Damon Price, the arrogant man who thought himself untouchable, was about to learn what it meant to collapse in the very place he believed was his kingdom. The clinking of knives and forks inside Harbor Street Bakery suddenly faded when another sound cut through the air. Tap, tap, tap. Lionel Ward gently tapped his spoon against the rim of a porcelain cup, a small action yet enough to make several customers turn their heads. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his worn brown coat falling to his sides, his silver hair catching the light from the window. To everyone, he looked like nothing more than an old regular. But the moment he spoke, the entire atmosphere shifted. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang out deep and steady. "I have something to say." Damon Price frowned, irritation flashing across his face as he tried to cut him off. "Old man, this is a restaurant, not a stage for speeches." Lionel turned, his gaze sharp, his voice unwavering. "I am Lionel Ward, the owner of this place." The words landed like thunder. Customers froze, spoons halted midair. Employees stood in shock, and Anna stopped in her tracks, the tray trembling in her hands. Damon's body stiffened, the forced smile on his face cracking apart. Lionel stepped into the center of the room and placed a thick folder on the counter. The papers fanned out, falsified reports, skewed accounts, Damon's signature stamped clear as day. Lionel turned each page slowly, his tone even, but cutting like ice. This is proof that he abused his staff, fabricated records to slander Anna Brooks, and embezzled cash for months. The crowd gasped. A few customers left their seats to come closer, while the employees exchanged looks of shock mixed with relief. The truth finally spoken aloud. Damon stammered, "No, this isn't true. These are fabricated. He's just a senile old fool." "Silence!" Lionel cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "I heard you admit it with my own ears. I saw with my own eyes how you crushed her hand." Anna trembled, her eyes wide as the painful memory rushed back. But this time she was no longer alone. Every gaze in the room was fixed on Damon. No more silence. No more complicity. At that exact moment, the door swung open. 2 police officers strode in, their boots striking firmly against the tiled floor. One pulled out a pair of cuffs, his voice ringing with authority. "Damon Price, you are under arrest for embezzlement, falsifying records, and assaulting an employee." The room went silent. Damon's face drained of color, his steps faltering backward. "No, you're making a mistake. I was only doing my job." The metallic snap of the handcuffs locking around his wrists echoed cold and final, cutting short every excuse. His arrogance evaporated, leaving only a desperate man with fear in his eyes. The bakery held its breath. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave. Employees stood together, some with tears welling, others casting respectful glances toward Anna. Lionel stood tall, his eyes burning with resolve. He didn't need to shout. The truth, the papers, and Damon's own confession spoke louder than anything else. Anna bowed her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, yet her lips curled into a real smile, the first in months after being buried under fear. The day of reckoning had come, and the man who once believed himself untouchable had been stripped bare before the crowd. Right in the heart of the empire, he thought he ruled. The sound of applause still echoed through Harbor Street Bakery as Damon Price was escorted out the door. The clinking of metal cuffs rang like a bell, marking the end of a dark chapter. Customers who had remained silent for months were now witnesses to the truth shining before their eyes. Anna Brooks stood quietly behind the counter, her left hand gripping the edge of a cloth, her right hand still wrapped in bandages, trembling not from fear, but from the weight that had finally lifted from her shoulders. The months of endurance, the mocking words, the scornful looks, all were swept away in a matter of moments. She was no longer the clumsy employee. She was someone who had survived the storm. Lionel Ward walked toward the counter, the golden morning light falling across his silver hair, making him appear like a statue of resolve. He stopped in front of Anna, his voice low but warm. "Anna, you have endured more than anyone should have to, and you're still standing. That strength cannot be overlooked." Anna looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "I just tried to do my job. I never wanted to cause trouble." "You didn't cause trouble," Lionel replied, his voice strong and clear so that every employee and customer could hear. "You kept this place standing even when others tried to tear it down." He turned to address the entire staff. "From today, Anna Brooks will be the new manager of Harbor Street Bakery. She has proven not only her ability but her integrity, which is the most important quality in any work." The room erupted in thunderous applause. Employees turned toward Anna, nodding, smiling, some quickly wiping tears from their eyes. Customers joined in, many rising from their seats as if sharing in the victory. Anna pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat return to a steady rhythm, no longer pounding in fear. Her smile now was no mask. It was filled with relief, pride, and gratitude. Lionel gently placed his calloused hand on her shoulder, leaning close to whisper just for her. Justice doesn't come quickly, but when it does, it shines brighter than any light. Anna nodded, and in her heart, a new faith was reborn. That truth, no matter how long it is buried, will always find its way out. Harbor Street Bakery returned to its rhythm, the scent of bread and coffee once again filling the air, but the atmosphere had changed. It was lighter, cleaner, a place once weighed down by fear, now filled with trust and respect. Lionel returned to his familiar corner, taking a sip of black coffee. A rare but profound smile crossed his lips. He knew this was not just about removing a cruel manager. It was a message to everyone that true strength does not come from threats or deceit, but from dignity and steadfastness. And at the center of it all, a young woman once thought of as weak had become a living testament to that truth. In the world of business, justice is not only carried out in courtrooms, but even in simple places like a small bakery. When the truth is hidden for too long, it will erupt, sweeping away deceit and restoring dignity to those who deserve it. Today's story reminds us that the true strength of an organization does not lie in a powerful manager, but in ordinary people who have the courage to keep moving forward. If you believe that justice always prevails, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. And leave a short comment. Justice wins, so together we can spread this message.